nobody evaluated the earnings call notes in preparation through the lens of how could AI use this against us or for us? Because AI is always building a case for or against a brand. Is this earnings call and what you're going to cover, is it presented in such a way that's going to help us? Or is it presenting things that introduce risk that AI will be trained on? And so nobody's looking at that. Same with the case study.
Most brands are optimizing to be found. Far fewer are asking what AI actually says about them once a buyer starts asking questions. That gap is exactly where Jessica Bowman, my guest on today's show, works. Jessica is a longtime SEO veteran with a career spanning 2 decades and a specialty in in-house SEO. As the founder of Coxwell and Gain, she's an enterprise strategist and consultant to Fortune 500 brands, pioneering the operational side of AI visibility. Her consultancy is built around a simple but urgent idea. AI is forming verdicts about your brand, and most organizations have no system to manage that. Jessica's work goes well beyond keywords and rankings. She helps companies see how decisions in product design, fulfillment, customer service, and even earnings calls shape what AI tells buyers about them. In this episode, we discuss how AI builds a case for or against a brand. We cover what an AI visibility audit actually looks like in practice. We explore why the fix often lives outside the marketing department entirely. And we get into what leaders need to know now and do before AI mode becomes the norm for all Google users. We also get into real tool costs, the new cross-functional demands this discipline creates, and why some of the most damaging AI narratives are ones brands unknowingly wrote themselves. If you've ever wondered whether AI is working for or against your brand, this conversation will provide some really interesting insights to sharpen how you think about it. So without any further ado, on with the show. Jessica, it's so great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me, Stephan. It's good to be here.
We've known each other for many years. You've been in the speaking circuit, SEO speaking circuit for decades, literally.
About 20 years.
And let's start with just share your hero's journey with our listener, our viewer. Like, how did you get into online marketing and SEO, and now like AEO and AI visibility? Like, how did that all unfold?
Right. So we have to go back. I was working at Enterprise Rent-A-Car 20 plus years ago. And I started in their R&D department. Then I moved into process analysis. And then I moved into user experience. Then I moved into kind of project management for front-end design. And then my job was dissolved. And so I sat there. They liked me enough to let me sit there and interview for other jobs in the company. And while I did that, I went around asking people how I could help. And one guy, he turned out to be one of my best managers, Paul Tucker. He said, we want to get into search engines. I think it's called search engine marketing. Why don't you go check that out? And so I did. And I came back about 2 or 3 weeks later with my first SEO audit. And I said, it's called search engine optimization. And this is what we need to do. So he went back with his boss for a couple of weeks. And they came back to me and said, Jessica, do you think this is a full-time job? I said, yes, there's several years of work in there. And he said, would you like the job? I said, yes. And that's how I got into SEO. So I was learning.
And what year was this?
Oh my goodness. 2004? No, I don't even remember. 2002? I don't even remember. It was over 20 years ago. And I mean, Ask Jeeves was still around back then. So it was very early days. Google was young. Very, very young. I just remember that. And Yahoo was cool. So I started doing SEO. And then at that time, no one in a large brand was really doing SEO or dedicated to it. So I would go to the conferences and talk about my problems with development and other teams. And people would just kind of look at me and said, wow, that sucks. And then move on, because they were consultants or they were independents with their own websites. So there weren't brands then. So I was learning trial by fire. How do you do SEO in a very large organization? And eventually that became my specialty. That's what I talked about at conferences. And I realized very quickly that was something I wanted to do was speak. And I just started pitching, and they liked what I had to talk about. And it resonated with a lot of brands and in-house managers. And so that's where I kind of carved out this niche of how do you do SEO in a very large organization. So now fast forward, I end up starting a consulting company, SEOinhouse.com, on that. And eventually, when AI came out, I started looking at what's really needed for AI, not just to rank, but again, on the operational side, what needs to happen in a very large organization and across the organization. And that's when I realized AI visibility is far larger than any other discipline we have. It's so different. It involves far more teams in the organization. A lot more cross functional work is going to be needed than what we ever saw in SEO. And so that is when I started Coxwell and Gain to specialize on this cross functional need and how do you improve recommendability, not just being found and cited.
And where did you come up with the name Coxwell and Gain?
Right. It's actually the first book I'm writing. So I'm in the progress of writing a book, which is not coming out soon. So I don't want to preempt that. But the idea behind it is in order to navigate this huge organization, you need a coxswain. And a coxswain is the guy that sits at the end of the boat when you are on a crew team and the team rows and the coxswain is calling the plays. This is how we need to row here. He can see the water and call the race plan based on what he's seeing. And that's the role we need. It is a completely new function in a new in the organization. It converts operations from just more of a perceived expense to it becomes an operational revenue generating role. And so that's how I came up with, at the end of the day, if you cox well, you'll gain. So I came up with Coxwell and Gain.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. And so this book that you're working on, why is it not coming out anytime
Well, great
soon?
question. So what was happening is this is all new. We are maturing, right? And as the content in the book was being fleshed out, it kept maturing in a way I thought, you know what? I want to give this a go, building and standing up with experience and then finishing out the book. The book is phenomenal for really helping you deep dive on every little aspect of things that you need to do. And that was great for that. But I felt like, you know what, I have an opportunity to start executing with clients. So let me execute and then bring those findings into the book. So the book is not over. It's just delayed, delayed just so
Okay.
that I can make it even better. Yeah. And I think that happens in a maturing organization, maturing brand new type of field. So I didn't want to launch something too soon.
Right. But what would somebody like who's thinking that things are speeding up and it's hard to keep up? What would you tell them about, well, it's not really, it's like you sleep for a week and the whole world's different. That's kind of what is being sold to us these days with the accelerating, gains from AI and other exponential technologies. Next thing you know, there's going to be quantum computing and nanotechnology and everything. So, is a book even relevant these days?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. And the book I'm writing is not on the technology. It's not on the evolution. It's a book for leaders. How do you navigate? What do you need to lead? What does your organization need to stand up? And I think when you look at it in that vein, through that lens, that's not going to evolve as much as if I were to be writing a book about how do you do geo on your website. That is going to evolve. The tools are going to evolve. The opportunities are going to change a bit. But what you need to do operationally is not going to change nearly as much. So I do think a book could be relevant still.
Yeah. So, what would be some of those things that a leader in an organization needs to do to future-proof and to be more in the AI era effectively?
Yeah, so I would say a lot of it's governance over KPIs that you already have governance, but not from the lens of you're being judged for AI recommendability, for whether or not AI is going to recommend your brand. one example is I have a client, and they one of the narratives that AI could tell buyers is that their customer service is bad, and that buyers get passed around and it's hard to find the right point of contact and yada yada. And it can also tell the buyer part of this is because, and then it explains, like it's explained to me as a buyer that, oh, this company is constantly acquiring new brands and they have 7 different screens that the customer service must navigate through. And, it just went on. And I was like, where are they getting this information? And it turns out they were getting this information often from 2 sources. One was the earnings call, because customer service issues were basically I don't want to say confessed to, but admitted to in the earnings call. That was evidence, right? I call it self-induced evidence. That was evidence self-induced that they put out against themselves and their customer service. And then the other was a case study between the brand and their vendor who they hired to solve this problem. And so that case study was also one of the things that was cited as a reason behind that. And basically it was saying that the teams have a lot of different systems they have to work through. Well, nobody evaluated the earnings call notes in preparation through the lens of how could AI use this against us or for us? Because AI is always building a case for or against a brand. And so is this earnings call and what you're going to cover, is it presented in such a way that's going to help us? Or is it presenting things that introduce risk, right? That AI will be trained on. And so nobody's looking at that. Same with the case study, right? The brand decided it made sense to partner with this company and it was okay to do a case study, but nobody looked at it through the lens of how could this impact narratives that AI may tell buyers. Because in the current or pre-AI era, none of those things conflicted. What you needed to be found in search was never affected by what was said in an earnings call or what was said in a case study. It just wouldn't even come across to the buyer in their buyer's journey unless they knew to look for those things. And so things are changing. And that's just 2 examples of what a brand needs. And I would call it's governance. And that's what the Coxswain role would do. They are the brand advocate for what risk are we introducing, what liabilities are we creating for ourselves, and how do we minimize that and instead create more opportunities or reasons for brands to be recommended, or our brand to be recommended.
Yeah. Well, there's been this side of SEO for many decades called ORM, or online reputation management. Seems like this is kind of a new evolution of ORM.
Yes, to an extent, yeah. Yeah, it's more like ORM is still like what's just external, right? Often responsive to problems. And this is looking really, let's go further upstream to not create the opportunity for a problem in the first place. And I think that's really what it is. It's not in my opinion, when I think about this role, it's not a marketing role. It's just an operational type of function, because you have to drive change in the organization. Has a very different mind, very different skill set than your traditional marketer. Can you find the unicorn? Of course, right? Like I was trained up in process analysis and thinking about things very differently. So that's why I can see what's needed. But not most marketers, I don't think, have those kind of skill sets as their greatest core competencies.
Yeah. So you mentioned a cross-functional team with getting all this in order. Like, what are all the departments? What are all the functions that
I
need
think
to be
everyone in
brought
the
in?
organization every function that affects the customer in any way or something public facing, right? So obviously public relations, social media, but even fulfillment and shipping, even manufacturing, right? So if you have problems with manufacturing, suddenly that can become an AI visibility challenge. So even manufacturing comes into play. One brand I audited, the ChatGPT would not recommend them. And they would not recommend this brand because of things like they're likely not going to enjoy the product because there's a lot of complaints about, let's say, materials in the product, and then the materials will cause you to return it, but the return process is difficult, and getting a refund actually credited to your account is difficult. So be prepared to call the bank. This is a huge problem for this brand. And so where did they what teams need to be involved? Well, refunds, right? That's finance. Then um, then manufacturing or potentially design, who's ever approving the different materials. Sometimes it might be how the quality of of how things are constructed, right? So even getting down to quality assurance or manufacturing details, whether it's training or level of quality from the manufacturer, that you need to make sure is up to snuff for where you want your brand to be and how you want it to be presented in AI. I think we are going to be moving into an era where, as a buyer, we are going to experience higher levels of customer quality, whether it's customer service or product quality. I think that those are the brands that are going to thrive, and those that don't end up doing this, I think Nordstrom level everything is how I think of it. Those that don't do these sorts of things, they are the ones that aren't going to be as recommended. So
Right. And
that's
so, yeah, and what's an audit look like? Like what's your process for doing the audit? What sort of tools are you using? What
Mhm.
output kind of format, and what's the depth
Yeah.
of this document or this presentation that you give?
Yeah, so there's various ways that we do it depending on the scope. A lot of them aren't super deep because you end up with too many action items, right? So we're looking at what is AI saying and what do we care about and what are the action items from that. So we're working with brands to say, okay, if you're launching a new product, what do you need to put in your product plan roadmap, right? Your new launch roadmap. If you are creating a new model, let's say, or the next season's product, what are the things that you need to consider? So defining what is that research process and what are the things that need to be used to inform these other teams in the organization so that as they think about the next iteration of the product or the brand new product, what goes into that. And a lot of it is not, oh, this is the tool I use. It's manual, it's qualitative because I need to understand what AI is saying, what are the variations of what AI is saying. So it's a very qualitative analysis to understand what is the risk versus the opportunity or strengths. Like an asset, what's the asset versus the liability in the search results? And the liabilities we want to reduce.
Hmm. So, like you're doing sentiment analysis,
It's
you're
sentiment because sentiment is positive or negative. It's more like, how's a brand positioned? Do you like how your brand is positioned? You
Mhm.
might be positioned as more or less the trusty rusty. Are you comfortable with that when your competitors are discussed as being more innovative or specifically engineered for this sort of use case, right? That's a very different presentation, and it will be evaluated different by buyers and help when as the buyer even weeds out, which brand do I want? Do I want the one that's specifically designed and engineered for my use case, or the one that's very reliable, gold standard? And each buyer is going to behave differently. And how does a brand feel about that? Are they okay with it? Maybe their buyers are the trusty rusty gold standard buyer, but that means you may have gotten these fringe use cases who are really wanting the something that's uniquely engineered for their use case. They may not get those buyers. So I think a lot of brands are going to lose fringe use cases that they're getting today, especially big brands that probably whenever all those buyers search, they're in the short list, but they're not necessarily going to be either in the short list or described in such a way that makes them interesting to the buyer for the short list, for their short list.
and what sort of implementation do you offer them after you deliver an audit?
At that point, we walk the brands through the audit and what the findings were. And most of my clients do the work in house. So they then take that information and then revise materials, and then we could go back and re-audit them and provide more detailed feedback and direction. So sometimes it's just provide the recommendations. Sometimes it's a detailed, like, okay, here's more detail on more the creative brief execution. Like, here's exactly what we suggest you do. But a lot of brands, especially my clients are a lot of B2B companies that are maybe selling machinery that costs, $10,000 to $2 million a pop for a buyer. And in those cases, they tend to want to write it in their own way and present it in their own way. And it requires a lot of domain knowledge. So in that case, they don't want us to write that content anyway.
And are you involved in like the technical side of implementation? Like with SEO, there's page speed, and is that an issue with with AEO? Is that something that you get involved with?
Not so definitely on the SEO side, absolutely. My clients don't really look at it as like, oh, we're doing this for geo page speed. We're still doing page speed because it's the right thing to do for SEO, which is still, Google. Most likely that is going to, I would think, still be a factor in Gemini. So it would still be there. My clients, while I do often do that right now, they have me focus on what is the AI visibility opportunity that we need to do. So it's working with training all of the teams. So a lot of my scopes now are train up all of these teams. And then they are, as the SEO, the in-house SEO team, they are tackling the geo piece themselves.
Got it. And so what sort of training are you doing? Are you teaching them how to do better prompting as well as use certain specialized tools? You teaching them how to write in a more AI friendly way? Like what sort of training are you doing?
Yeah, so it's a variety. So I would say there's training for like the SEO team or AEO teams. So like one of my clients, that's what I'm training them to do, the narrative audits. So they can then go in and start auditing their, million product portfolio in-house. So their teams will be able to do that. So I built out the entire framework for doing that, and all of the like spreadsheets that build everything out complete, automatically, so that they can focus on analysis. So that's one kind of layer of what we need to do. Another thing is evaluating tools, like what tools make sense for the SEO team, which I don't have a favorite tool yet, but what are the tools that they should look at? So kind of joining their team to evaluate some of those, and then advising SEO managers, like heads of SEO and heads of AI, on what are the things they need to be thinking about. How do they plan for this? How do they talk about it to leadership? Kind of coaching them or advising them on what's next and what does that look like, so that they can kind of better prepare. And then the cross-functional teams are how do they impact AI visibility, and what do they need to do about it? What are their action items associated with that?
So, going back to your earlier history when you were focusing on in-house SEO, how do you see the effectiveness of outsourcing to an agency, AEO or GEO, and doing that in-house? What are the pluses and minuses on both sides?
You mean for SEO or AI visibility?
For AI visibility, SEO is still a kind of a
Hmm.
foundational
Yeah.
cornerstone to AEO. You cannot have effective AEO, I think, if your SEO is a hot mess. So,
Yeah, I agree too. I agree too. So I would say a lot of it depends on the organization and almost who you have in house or who you could bring in. So if you have this stellar in-house team, which few companies have that, big brands often do, you can run almost exclusively in-house. It's not a recommendation. I think that you end up getting narrow views. I think you end up being highly influenced by the structure of the org and some of the challenges that you face, that sometimes you don't get the best strategic plans. You don't see things That's been my observation. So I highly recommend someone come in, you bring in someone for audits at least once a year. So that's like low level engagement with an agency. Then other teams, they have good people in place. Like maybe they're teams that know the brand, that know the teams that need to be involved, but they're not the super senior SEOs. And so that's when it makes sense to bring in someone who can advise and help them be better at what they need to be doing. And then there are also times when you just don't have enough, you don't have a big enough team, so you need extra bandwidth, right? That definitely is when it makes sense to bring in an agency. So I think the bigger the organization, the more complex teams you need to work with. That's when it becomes more important to have in-house staff to interface with all of those teams. Agencies just, I think, struggle to do that, not necessarily because they're bad at it, but it's they're not their boots on the ground, right? They're not in the strategic meetings that the SEO team is. So
Yeah. So what sort of costs should an organization prepare for in this area of AI visibility? Like the audits, what do those run? The tools that they'll need to subscribe to, the different service providers or vendors, agencies, or the in-house person or people and their salaries. Like what are we talking about here?
my goodness, I'm somewhat thumb in the wind. Well, thumb in the wind. So I think that the first thing you have to realize is SEO isn't going away. So it's not like you are replacing the SEO budget and moving it into the AEO or GEO budget, and suddenly it's going to be, not as much of a lift. You're starting a completely new discipline in parallel to the SEO tasks. So just assume SEO tasks remain in place. My observation on the tools is they are far more expensive than SEO tools. So for you to be monitoring prompts across a large portfolio, across multiple regions and languages, you suddenly have increased it even further. So it's just more per prompt to track than it was per keyword. And so all the tools have told me it's just very expensive. And so I think that you just need to know, like, your tools are going to cost 2 or 3 times the price of what you're paying for SEO tools,
Yeah.
especially
Are
if
we talking like over $1,000 a month typically?
oh yeah, my clients are looking at like probably 80 to 150 a year. So my clients are mostly big brands, so they're looking at very expensive tools. If you have to go for a small tool, I would say if you have a large portfolio, you're looking at several thousand a month minimum. And that's some of the lower end tools. Because even me, for just my audits, I'm struggling to find something for, less than 500 a month. It's not, you're getting such minimal insights. It's not, I don't think, in my opinion, useful for managing your program ongoing over time, unless you are an organization that sells one thing and you have a very small set of prompts that your buyers would be typing in that you need to monitor. Very few organizations fall in that category.
Right. And so what are some of your favorite tools for prompt tracking and
I don't have a
analysis?
favorite yet, I've got to say. I mean, I do like Wayk. I think it's an inexpensive tool to get started with. I think they do have some interesting insights.
Yeah.
Um,
By the way, I've interviewed Dixon Jones about
yeah,
his tool, Awake. Yeah.
yeah, it's a good tool. It does, but when I sat down to really use it, I saw a lot of functionality gaps that they haven't filled yet. Like, the pieces are there, they just don't have functionality. Like, I uploaded a bunch of prompts and now I can't delete the prompts. Last time I checked, so I have to like delete the project and start over. Little things, quirks like that. It was. I think in this AI era, it's like rushed to market, and a lot of I would call them minimal viable products right now. They may not, but that's what when I look at them, that's what I see. There's just a lot of functionality I would have expected that I cannot get. And yeah, so I've looked at, Profound, I've looked at SEMrush, I've looked at Cognizio. Cognizio looks like an interesting one. So I've looked at that one. And I think I've really only probably actually purchased Wayk. And one of the interesting things for smaller brands or companies and consultants is I found it hard to just buy. Like a lot of these are trying to like, let's talk about your product and what you really need and let's scope it. And I was in the middle of a project 3 times. I was like, let me just go in and try and buy. And some of the tools I really wanted to buy, I couldn't just buy off the rack, basically. I couldn't just log in and purchase. And so that was a little frustrating. So you want to make sure you plan ahead for those tools.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
And what do you charge for AI visibility audit?
It is so it definitely depends on how many products we're looking at. Um, my preference is not to do an audit, but let's pilot what needs to be put in place. So I have an entire framework of what needs to be stood up in an organization to manage and govern and minimize risk for AI visibility. So my preference is not just let's do an audit, but let's build the system so that the audits aren't as important because you're constantly auditing the organization. And so you're definitely looking at a 6-figure longer term project to do that. In fact, most of the clients, when they see what needs to be done, they see, oh, I see this is my long range planning, year 1, year 2, year 3. This is what we would end up doing. So it probably will turn into probably a 3-year project for most organizations to do it right.
Got it. Okay.
Mhm.
Can't imagine what 3 years is going to be like
I
Skynet
know.
and everything, right?
Yeah. But it's a lot. It's just so much bigger. I think brands haven't really seen it yet, but a lot of brands are not going to be recommended for things that they didn't even realize affect whether or not you're going to get recommended by AI or what AI might say to buyers.
What are your favorite LLMs these days? Like ChatGPT has seemed to have lost some favor to Claude in recent months. I'm curious what your favorites are and why.
So I've got to say, ChatGPT is still my favorite, though I understand it's controversial. And I think the difference is I've trained it. So my ChatGPT instance is highly trained at this point on what I do, what I focus on, how I write. And to start over feels daunting, right? To start somewhere new. It has a history of understanding, remember this project, remember this client. Remember this thing I was trying to do a while back. Remember we talked about this. And ChatGPT knows. And so it has that history. And I think a lot of people aren't putting in the hours to do that. And I don't blame them. And it's not a fault. I was writing a book. So I was spending, I think my ChatGPT instance is trained thousands of hours on one thing. And that's another thing I learned that the moment I realized when I asked my personal questions and the one off questions about this topic over here, ChatGPT wasn't as good. But if I would keep just laser focused on my work, ChatGPT responses were far superior. So I now never use it for anything outside of my consulting work, and it's much better. Do I want to try Claude? Absolutely. I just haven't really tried it out since it's had some major enhancements. Gemini is okay. I like to bounce that Gemini, my ChatGPT stuff off Gemini. But Gemini is sometimes like more I think of it an engineering type of response, an engineering mind response. And so while it's good, it does have some limitations. I also find it's not as good at remembering my history. So sometimes it can remember things in the past, and sometimes it doesn't. So that's my preference. I realize it's counter to what everyone is saying in the field right now. But again, I think this is evidence of what we are going to see in the real world. People are going to have their LLMs trained up on them so well that they won't want to leave because it will be painful because you'll have to retrain. And so like me for my work, I don't want to retrain. I've already got this one trained up. And yeah, so that's what I think is going to happen. That eventually people will become kind of not stuck, but they will have such a poor experience changing over that they would eventually come back. And that's if they continue to use one because hyper personalization is already here and it's only going to mature from here.
Yeah. So it's goes to the idea of switching costs. You know, back in the day when it was costly to switch from one cellular provider to another, mean, the pricing, the plans, and so forth have changed these days, but it was such a hefty penalty you'd have to pay to leave your contract early that you just stuck with it. And then they sweetened the deal when it came time to renewal. So you get a free phone, you get all these perks and discounts and everything. So, but
Yeah,
now
and the
it
trickier the
has to do
sunk
with
costs.
the history and
Yeah.
the memory and everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Have you
Yep.
heard of a tool called Mem Palace? It's actually released from a pretty famous actress. She starred in the Fifth Element. So Mila Jovovich or something.
Uh-huh.
She came up with this, and it's gone viral. It's a GitHub repository with the code there that helps the AI remember you and all your previous prompts and all the important stuff without losing the like the resolution of it, right? So normally the AI will just kind of remember its own summary of what you were telling it, and stuff is lost in translation. But with this memory palace concept, which is do you know what a memory palace is?
No, this is all new to me.
Okay, so it's a memorization technique. It's been around for
Yep. Okay.
eons. So let's say that you're trying to remember a long number or a
Mm-hmm.
series of words. It might be like a seed phrase for
Yep.
cryptocurrency or something, right? So you want to remember it and you never want to forget it. Well,
Yeah.
you associate each thing that you're trying to remember with a room in a palace or a house or museum or whatever, and you're going from room to room and you're sticking these things, maybe it's an elephant, maybe it's a blueberry pie or whatever, in these different places in the room, and you're visually, remembering the layout of the room, and then you go to the next room and so forth, and so then you kind of decompile that when you're trying to pull out all the things that you're remembering. So this concept doesn't just work for remembering stuff, without cheating, without a notepad or something handy, but it also works with the AIs. And so this algorithm, it, based on the memory palace concept, makes the output exceedingly good, like markedly better. So I suggest you check it out. So Mem Palace.
Cool. I'll have to
Anyways,
find
so
for everybody.
what are some of the fun, cool new hacks and tips and things that you have uncovered in recent weeks that you would want to share with our audience here?
I don't know that it's cool or new, but for the first time, I started using AI to develop really robust formulas in Excel. It's not new. It's just something I never really had a need for. I was able to do what I needed, but I have a project that I'm working on now where I need a lot of data to be just easily dropped in and then reformatted and analyzed and heat maps and that sort of thing. And I'm using ChatGPT to write all the formulas. And it's been phenomenal. Unbelievable what it is able to do. Upload a screenshot, explain it. Sometimes I don't even upload the screenshot, I just explain what I need, and it just spits out an amazing formula. So I would say that was one of my big, like, whoa. I knew AI was good, but I really thought it was a complex formula I needed and functionality for it to do. And it built it out for me, and it was easy copy paste. So I
Mm-hmm.
would say that was my latest big hack.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
And what are some things that I should have asked you about, but we didn't get to? I know we've got a
Mm.
few minutes left in this interview.
I would say, what do leaders need to know? Like, what do executives need to know? What would you tell executives about what's coming and how they need to plan?
Hmm.
So I think
Yeah,
that,
yeah, that's a great question. Why don't you go ahead and answer it?
yeah. So I would say executives need to look at AI visibility not through the lens of what was SEO, but come at it with fresh eyes because it's totally different. Yes, there are similarities, but I feel like if you come in with the SEO connotation, you do not take away the real essence of what AI visibility is. and that it's really judging your brand. And yes, your SEO team can absolutely make sure that you're found and make sure they know the facts about your brand, but they will hit a glass ceiling if you do not address the operational problems that are causing AI to learn things about you that may limit recommendations. So AI is looking for, are you a good fit? Do you introduce low risk, high success rate? And depending on that buyer, you may or may not, based on how your brand is judged. And those verdicts are going to have millions to trillions of different perceptions that AI has, different narratives that they may tell, and more or less different verdicts for each different buyer scenario. And you need, as an organization, you need a framework and a system for governing all of that so that you nip things in the bud before they become a problem. And I think another thing to realize is where you're winning today may not be where you win in the future, and you may not be able to get around it. It's almost like a brand needs to choose the few areas they need to win, because you're not going to be able to be everything to all buyers. You're not going to be able to be the best match for everyone. And that's where the market is going to completely recalibrate. And you need to understand, if it were to recalibrate today, are you comfortable with that? And if not, what is your plan to change that? You need to understand what needs to change, because some of these things are going to take 18 to 24 months in order for you to see a change in the narratives from AI, particularly if you're a brand such as a clothing company, right? And you're designing clothes now that won't launch for another 12 to 18 months potentially out in the open, and then for people to experience and comment, and then AI to be retrained on it. So your lack of planning now or taking action now is going to actually stunt your ability to make a lot of influence on the AI narratives in the future when AI is here. Right now, it's on its way. And once this Google flips the switch and Gemini really leads google.com as the dominant responses, well, it's already showing up. You still have some organic responses there. It will eventually, I think, flip where it's almost all Gemini. And when that comes, are you comfortable with how Gemini is positioning you as a brand? And most leaders cannot say yes or no to that, because it's not something that they've really looked at or considered, and they don't understand the operational changes needed, such as maybe your earnings calls, the outlines need to be reviewed for risk and opportunity or potential liabilities. Maybe your materials need to be evaluated. Product designs maybe need to be evaluated. Maybe your fulfillment needs some change management and change leadership in place. Maybe shipping has some issues, right? So you may have to go down to shipping and do some work. And so you need to make sure that you have in place the ability to take action, but also recognize what action needs to be taken.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. And where does our listener go to learn more from you, maybe hire you, get your book whenever it comes out, that sort of stuff?
Yes, you can go to coxwellandgain.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, Jessica, this was a pleasure. Thank you for coming on the show.
Pleasure, Stephan. Great catching up with you. It's been a long time. And thank you very much. I hope everyone benefited in some way from the things we discussed today.
All right. And thank you, listener. Now go out there and make it a better world through AEO, SEO, marketing, and whatever else is your specialty. We'll catch you in the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off. If you want to hear more conversations like this about AI visibility and the future of search, then I recommend episode 536 with me, Stephan Spencer, episode 537 with Dwayne Forrester, and episode 539 with Patrick Stocks. Also, I invite you to check out the show notes, transcript, action-based checklist, and all the URLs mentioned in this interview with Jessica Bowman at marketingspeak.com/544. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share the episode, and more importantly, the entire show Marketing Speak with a friend. It'll really help this podcast grow in reach and impact. Thank you.